In this wonderful modern time, we have the luxury of ordering just about any food we want for delivery. It's easy to get anything from pizza to a chicken sandwich. On the flip side, we can take jobs as delivery drivers and make a few bucks on the side. It's easy work, and when you're a single mother like me, any extra income is good income. A few weeks ago, I delivered some food to a nice suburban community. It was one of those neighborhoods you'd see on a Disney Channel show. Nice houses, picket fences, you know the neighborhoods I'm talking about. And like all the deliveries I make, I'm supposed to take a picture of the food at the front door. Think of it as like an insurance policy in case the food is at the wrong house or stolen or something weird happens. I place the food in front of the door, on top of the small staircase that leads to the door. I took a few steps back and took a picture of it. After taking the picture, I was walking back to my car when I was confronted by an extremely angry and enraged woman who came out from the house across the street. I asked her what her problem was, and she just kept screaming at me, saying that it was private property and that I was trespassing. I tried explaining one time to the woman what I did and why I took the picture, and it did not compute in her tiny little brain. After being continuously cut off every time I tried to speak, I decided to just get into my car and drive away. I tried being nice, but clearly this woman was insane. I got inside my car and was checking my phone for another delivery. The woman started to bang on the hood of my car, causing me to jump from being startled. I got out of the car aggressively to see if there was any damage, and she ran back to her house. There was no damage, but I was so done with this delivery and I decided to just call it a night. I ended up driving home and spending the evening with my daughter. We ate dinner, played some games, and watched a movie together. I put her to bed and started binge-watching one of my favorite shows, and I would have guessed that it was around midnight when I heard someone knocking at my front door. Knocking rather aggressively, I might add. I couldn't believe what I was looking at through the peephole in the door. It was the crazy woman from the delivery earlier in the day. I didn't answer. I didn't even say anything. I just kept watching this woman, trying to figure out what she was doing at my house. She had to have followed me home, which was already insanely creepy, and while I was watching her, she went over to the walkway that led to my front door. From the driveway, I have this path of little stones that leads to the front door. It's not like big slabs of pavement, but rather small stones that almost fit together like a mosaic. The woman grabbed one of the stones, roughly the size of an average dinner plate, and put it behind her back. She started to knock on the door again, still concealing the stone behind her back. And this is where things get very weird. I didn't answer the door, but I shouted to her that I had called the police. And this must have scared her because she threw the stone at my house and ran away. I did end up calling the police and reporting what happened. They followed up, but nothing really came of it, and that was the end of the story until recently. If that was all that happened, that would be scary enough, not knowing what she wanted from me and her showing up in the middle of the night. But things got much worse. About a week after the incident, I saw the woman at the grocery store. No confrontation or anything like that, but then I saw her several other times just driving. Again, no confrontation or anything else. I wanted to say it was just a coincidence, but it almost felt a little too weird. I have a friend who is married to a cop, and I talked to him about it. I explained that something felt off, but it's possible that it was just pure chance that I kept noticing her, and he agreed. He basically said that because I'm aware of this woman, I'm subconsciously picking her out of the crowd in our town. I didn't like that answer, but I guess technically he was right. It is a pretty smallish town after all. And this brings me to about a week ago as of me writing this account. I just got my daughter on the bus and I was outside pulling some weeds. While I was on the ground, I could feel someone standing over me. I turned around, and it was that woman. The same damn woman from that stupid delivery. I was completely vulnerable in that position and I didn't know what to do. And she said in a sort of soft but angry voice, "You're a monster for calling the cops. You're a trespasser." I noticed that she had one of my stones again, and without thinking, flight mode kicked in, and I got up and ran as fast as I could. She actually tried hitting me with a stone, but she missed. I ran inside and locked the door. I called the police and told them that she was back and trying to hit me with a rock. The police showed up, and this time, they arrested that crazy woman. It turns out that that woman had some pre-existing history of mental health. I'm not exactly sure what it was. And because this is so fresh, I don't exactly know what happened to her. I saw her get taken away in the back of a squad car because she was still at my house when the police came. And I just hope this nightmare is over. At least for now, it seems to be over. I just hope that she gets the help that she needs and that I never have to see her crazy face again.
Hey guys, thanks so much for all the support. If you haven't subscribed to the channel yet, please feel free to do so. My mom travels a lot as part of her job, so she stayed in a whole bunch of different hotels. So she's on short flight from New York City to Toronto. And she gets talking to a guy who's in a similar kind of job, only he's actually from Toronto and had been visiting Manhattan on business. Mom thinks she can swoop in and undercut the deal he was getting, earning a bunch of kudos from her bosses in the process. So she gives this guy her business card and tells him to call her. They land and they say goodbye, and my mom heads off to her hotel for the evening. A few hours later, she's almost ready for bed when she gets a call from the hotel lobby saying my dad was there to surprise her, and would it be okay if they gave him a copy of her room key? Mom hadn't been expecting him, and the way she tells it, she was actually kind of angry that he'd apparently left a 6-year-old me with a sitter when I'd just gotten over chicken pox. So she calls to be like, "What are you doing, Paul?" Only my dad has no idea what she's talking about. He was at home taking care of me. And she could even hear me over the line to confirm if she tells Dad she'll call him back. And then heads down to the lobby to see when the world is going on. And who should it be waiting in the lobby pretending to be my dad? The guy she gave the business card to. As you can imagine, she was both freaked out and very angry. But she calmly explains to the concierge that the guy was not her husband, and that if he turned her again, he was to call the cops. The guy tried to play all innocent, acting like he was just picking up the wrong vibes from her or whatever. But he could have called her, he could have asked the reception to call her. There were a million different things he could have done if he thought she was just looking for some little work trip affair. She didn't do any of that. They just tried to talk his way into getting himself a freaking room key, presumably hoping he could catch my mom sleeping. Obviously, my mom was in no mood to sleep after the little encounter, and she remembers that she has a copy of this guy's business card too. She couldn't exactly call the cops, and the guy since he hadn't actually committed any crime. But she could contact the company he worked for to maybe get him fired for being such a creep. But when she calls the number on the card, she discovers it's a dead number, and the company that's listed on the card that she eventually was able to get a hold of never even heard of the guy in question. The guy gave her a fake card, presumably just to get hers. He was never in the same business as her, but the fact that he managed to talk a good enough game to convince her is incredibly creepy to me. Like, there's only one thing scarier than an evil psychopath predator, and that's a smart one. Luckily, my mom was able to fly back the following afternoon after a business meeting, but it was definitely a close call, and I thank God she was able to get away safely. Over the years, I have heard many men complaining about how it's impossible to please a woman. From my best friend Tommy to my grandfather Maynard, they all kept saying making a woman happy is no easy job. None of them were ever able to truly claim that they could ever understand how to make them happy. But it wasn't a tad bit hard for me, because I had made a lot of women happy over the years. But on one very unusual Wednesday afternoon, I made one woman a little happier than intended. My name's Charlie Huffman. I'm a 34-year-old masseur, and I've been doing this for the past 12 years of my life. All my life, since I started giving out massages to women, I never once heard any of them complain about it. But they did complain a lot about how unhappy their lives were, or how their husbands or boyfriends had no clue about how to make things right. I was so good at my job that once a woman received a message from me, they would insist on being my client. Because of that very reason, I had to turn away most of them. I'm a human just like the rest of you, so I'm also selfish and greedy like that. The only clients I didn't turn away were those who could offer me something better, something interesting in return. Some were ready to offer me tons of money, while some were ready to give me their gorgeous bodies. I have no idea how I developed such interesting and amazing techniques to satisfy them, but it was so clear that they all loved letting me take away all the stresses in their lives. It was one day when I was giving a massage when I received a special request from a rich lady named Patricia Miller, who had recently transferred to the town to give her a massage. It was her first time, so I thought I would accept it and see what happened. Her special request was that I go to her house instead of her coming to my place, so I told the servant who came with the request that I would be charging her 3 times more if I would go there, to which she agreed. I was supposed to go and give her a massage on Wednesday at 11 a.m., but I reached 8 minutes early. She had already prepared everything that was needed for the massage: a table, massage oil, lotions, creams, covers, towels, a foot roll bolster. Hell, she even had music prepared. I was quite impressed by that. "I've heard a lot about you from the ladies," she said in a low, seducing tone. "I bet you have." My tone was rather sarcastic, but it was pretty obvious that she called me after hearing about me. "Did you like the preparations I made for the session?" she asked in the same low tone. "Yes, I can see you've done your research. Shall we get started?" I asked, while keeping my tone professional. She smiled at me, and then slipped the robe she was wearing. There was absolutely nothing underneath. I bet she may have heard that I prefer my clients to keep their underwear on, but it was clear she did not care about that. Since it was her first time, I thought I would let it slide. She lay down on the massage table, and I started giving her the best massage I could give, because I needed to take as much money from her as I could. As I was almost about to finish the massage, her body started to quiver. Her moans became louder, and her breathing became uneven. That's how I knew what was happening. The moment I finished giving her a massage, she turned to me and gave me a weirdly satisfied smile. "When can I hope for the next session?" she asked while catching up on her breath. "I'll be quite busy for the next few days because of my tight schedule, so I'll let you know when I'm available." It was true that I was busy, but I knew exactly when slots were open. But since I did not want to give this woman, who was a bad sign, another massage, I made up an excuse. There are all kinds of women in this world, dangerous, devious predators waiting to strike, and this woman was a piece of bad news waiting to ruin my career. It was because of my career that I became so good at differentiating women, and the best way for me to spot a dangerous woman was to see how she behaved with a man on their first meeting. That's how I figured her to be someone whom I should avoid at any cost. After taking my pay, I went back to my place, since there was already some sessions scheduled. The day went all right afterward, and once it was over, I went back to my place. For the past couple of days, I had started seeing this girl, and she was a real gem. But that night, I didn't get a call from her, nor did she answer mine. I thought she must be busy somewhere, so I let it go and went to sleep. The next day, I went to work at my usual time, but after waiting for about an hour for my first client, who was a regular, they did not show up. I called her, but she didn't answer. Thinking it might be a coincidence, I ignored it and started waiting for the next client. But weirdly enough, the second client didn't show up either. The limit of my patience was crossed when the third and fourth clients didn't show up either. Started to make me feel nervous and scared. That was when someone walked in. I felt thankful that at least not all of them canceled, but then I turned around face to face with her, and I froze. "You're not too busy today, are you?" It was Patricia. She was standing in front of me with a smile that disgusted me. "Did you do something to my clients?" I asked in an angry tone. Well, it's nobody's fault if there was a fire during a tea party. She laughed while coming closer. You're sick, I said with disgust in my voice, which she did not like. You said you were too busy to give me a massage, so I just made time for myself, she said. Why are you doing this? We don't even know each other. My voice was showing obvious signs of frustration. Maybe you don't remember me, but I do. I was one of your very first clients back in Manhattan when you started your career as a masseur, but all of a sudden you disappeared. You had no idea how devastated I was, since I was in love with you. But now we can be together, Charlie. She cupped my face while smiling and telling me all of this. Oh, hell no. Get out of here, woman. I don't even remember you. How can you think I would be with you? I slapped her hands away and said all of this in disgust. She became furious and started screaming and throwing things at me like a sociopath. No, actually, the way she was behaving, she was a sociopath. As I was trying to get away from her, she fell and hit her head on the massage table. I went to check if she was all right, but she wasn't breathing. I couldn't understand what I was supposed to do, and that's when I remembered something she said earlier. I threw scented candles on the curtains and drapes and caught it fire before it could spread in the area. I got out and locked the gate from outside. As I was walking away from the crime scene, I'm hoping for her body to burn down completely, or else I would have to come up with another lie to cover up.
September 2008. A woman walks into a New York City branch of the coffee chain Starbucks. Her name is Hannah Up, and like all other customers, her presence is recorded on the small number of CCTV cameras that are present in the store. Yet when asked her name so it can be written on the side of her cup, Hannah doesn't give her real name. But not out of any kind of duplicitousness. You see, Hannah doesn't realize who she is. In fact, the young woman seemed to have forgotten herself entirely. Hannah grew up in Oregon, the daughter of two Methodist ministers. As a result of their parents' profession, Hannah spent a great deal of her youth in a handful of predominantly Japanese-American churches in her native state, where her parents both served as pastors. The family shared a deep connection with the Japanese migrant community, to the point where Hannah's mother, Barbara, spoke fluent Japanese after spending a few years teaching in Kyoto. Hannah had a mostly healthy and happy relationship with her parents, but obviously, both were rigid in their religious beliefs. This made it difficult for Hannah to communicate the fact that, as she grew older, she found herself more attracted to some of the other girls at school, rather than her male counterparts. This quite possibly motivated her to relocate to the much more liberal New York City after her graduation from the Pennsylvania Seven Sisters College in 2007. It was there that she funded the pursuit of her master's degree by working as a teacher, all the while volunteering for a charity that provided assistance to those suffering from HIV and AIDS. She was highly intelligent, outgoing, and by all accounts had a great sense of humor, so she was spoken highly of by all that had the good fortune to know her. At age 23, Hannah transferred to a middle school in Harlem named the Thurgood Marshall Academy. She was reportedly very excited at the posting and felt it gave her a chance to make a real difference among some of the city's most vulnerable youth. On the first day of classes in September of 2008, Hannah didn't show up to work, and it quickly became obvious that she had vanished. The disappearance of a beloved middle school teacher quickly became a high-profile case among local and national media outlets. Hannah's face was on almost every local news channel, all of which asked the public for any and all information related to her disappearance. These efforts were reinforced by scores of Hannah's friends and former classmates, who canvassed New York City with thousands of leaflets and flyers in the hopes that it might generate some clues. From what law enforcement could gather, Hannah left her downtown apartment on a jog that she never returned from. Yet 10 days later, Hannah's Apple ID was used at an NYC Apple store. Police had employees pull up the relevant CCTV footage, feeling a great deal of relief that the tape showed Hannah to be alive and well. However, the employees had something rather disturbing to report. Although the woman in the footage was quite obviously Hannah Up, When approached by an old high school friend, Hannah apparently denied being herself altogether. Hey, Hannah, it's me. Are you alright? Everyone's looking for you." But instead of offering an explanation for her disappearance, Hannah apparently responded with, "Excuse me, my name isn't Hannah." The Apple Store employee later said that Hannah's response seemed frustrated, like it wasn't the first time that day where someone had approached her in such a way. The interaction seemed to have irritated Hannah so much that she walked away from the man and out of the store entirely. It was then that she made her way to the aforementioned branch of Starbucks and then onto a nearby gym, where it's assumed that she worked out and showered. Investigators were hot on Hannah's trail but couldn't quite seem to catch up with her. Despite the bizarre, forgetful episode, she seemed to be taking care of herself and wasn't acting in a self-destructive manner, which is why it was so confusing for investigators when members of the New York Harbor Police pulled her out of the Hudson in a severely dehydrated state, with absolutely no memory of the previous few weeks. She once again knew who she was, but offered no explanation for the events of the previous few weeks, nor her disappearance. After a few days' worth of recovery in a New York hospital, doctors declared that the most likely explanation for Hannah's bizarre episode was what was known as a disassociative fugue. In a disassociative fugue, people lose some or all memories of their past, and they usually disappear from their usual environments, leaving their family and job. The word fugue comes from the Latin words for flight and flee. The condition is sometimes given the playful nickname of Jason Bourne syndrome, in reference to the movies about a CIA agent suffering from a disassociative fugue who remembers nothing but his extensive training. Many of those who experience disassociative fugue states do so because they have suffered from a tremendous amount of trauma. But Hannah's mother later insisted that her fugue episodes don't appear to have any clear or obvious triggers, and when asked, Hannah could not recall any traumatizing events she had endured. The family even paid for an intense hypnotherapy session in which a trained hypnotist attempted to unearth any buried trauma or memories that may be affecting Hannah on a subconscious level. Yet after zero progress was made after numerous appointments, the hypnotherapist was baffled, and nothing in the way of trauma could be discovered. People have been known to not only travel across cities or countries, but also across continents, said Professor Emeritus of Psychiatry at Indiana University. The explanation behind the fugue is that the person is running away from a bad situation, from a bad marriage or a bad financial situation. According to numerous news outlets, one of Hannah's close friends made an attempt to discuss the 2008 fugue with Hannah, but said she often just sat in silence, almost like she was completely unable to talk about it. It felt like the words we have in the English language were not sufficient to describe this. This friend later added, and we can only imagine her frustration at her dear friend being unable to properly articulate what had happened. The following year, Hannah sat down with a reporter in a coffee shop and once again attempted to describe her terrifying ordeal in her own words, and this is what she said. It goes from, like, going to a run to, like, being in the ambulance. For me, that was like 10 minutes past, but in reality, it was more like 3 weeks. The hardest part is the period right after. You feel shame, and you feel embarrassed, or you feel guilt. All things that I've definitely felt. It's weird. How do you feel guilty for something you didn't even know you did? It's not your fault, but it's still somehow you. So it's definitely made me reconsider everything. Who was I before? Who was I then? Is that part of me? Who am I now? My roommates and I have a code word to show that I'm not going to fugue again, Hannah went on to say. My roommate had done this long interview with ABC, and the only thing they ended up printing was that I was a friendly vegetarian who likes to try new dishes. So if I don't get home one night, they'll text me like, friendly vegetarian, and I'll reply with, who likes to try new dishes, so we know we're on the same page. In early 2010, Hannah left her life in New York behind, moving to Philadelphia for a few months while she worked at a Quaker study retreat named Pendle Hill. It was here that she met a young man by the name of Patrick Rosal, and the pair had dated for a while before Hannah shared the story of her fugue episode with him. Being the good-natured soul that he was, Patrick didn't seem to be bothered by the revelation and considered it a freak accident. "The way I see it," Patrick later said, "Hannah gives so much to other people that at a certain point there is literally nothing left, and she departs from herself." Hannah spent a few years in Philly before again moving on, this time to Maryland in September of 2013. But it's here that she experienced yet another bout of disassociative fugue that lasted 2 days. She suddenly came to when she found herself sitting in a creek with a shopping cart beside her. But despite the confusing and terrifying experience, she noticed a kind of trend that linked her fugue episodes together. 1. They tended to happen at the start of the school year. 2. Her pattern of behavior tended to focus around wandering whichever city she was living in. And 3. She always came out of her fugue when in contact with a body of water. With these in mind, Hannah quickly decided to move somewhere with plenty of water where she couldn't roam too far or into anything too dangerous. So in 2014, Hannah got herself a job as a teaching assistant in the U.S. Virgin Islands, moving to the island of St. Thomas where she embraced a new life and new friends. By all accounts, Hannah loved her new life on the island and found working with preschoolers to be extremely rewarding. Then, days after a Category 5 hurricane and days before yet another one, Hurricane Irma and Maria, friends noticed something was off. She seemed super out of it. They described her as being almost in a trance. On yet another beautiful September day, 32-year-old Hannah Emily Upp disappeared again. On September 14, 2017, she told her roommates she was headed over to the Montessori school to help them prepare for the incoming hurricanes. She got in her car and was never seen again. Despite desperate searches for local homeless shelters, beaches, hospitals, and even the morgue, Hannah was nowhere to be found. But given how she always seemed to turn up or reassociate whenever coming into contact with water, the cops figured it was only a matter of time before she showed up. In an attempt to intercept her before she endangered herself, police searched for Hannah around the island's marina, asking various ship captains and crew members if they'd seen an American girl exhibiting any unusual behavior. None had, but it was at one of these marinas, Sapphire Beach to be specific, that the cops found Hannah's abandoned car. Inside were a number of her personal items, such as passport and purse, which contained a few $100 in cash. Nearby was a small beach bar that served burgers and beer locals and tourists alike. It was there that Hannah's sarong, sundress, and sandals were found, neatly folded on a bar stool as if she planned to return to them to collect them after swimming. Terrified that Hannah has drowned, the Coast Guard sent 3 helicopters to search for her, while Hannah's friends checked the manifests of people evacuated from the island on mercy ships. But again, not a single trace of her was ever located, and the search for her unearthed far more questions than answers. The only logical explanation was that Hannah had gone to take a swim, gotten caught in a strong current, and then drowned. But if Hannah had drowned, her body would likely float to the surface within a few days. An emergency medical technician named Jacob Bradley circled the island in a rescue boat for hours on end in the days that followed, but again, no sign of the missing teacher was ever found. He even paid a visit to the St. Thomas morgue, as well as several others on the surrounding islands. All in all, he inspected 10 different drowning victims, and none were Hannah. The situation progressed to the point that Hannah's mother, Barbara Upp, moved out to St. Thomas to organize and aid in the search for her daughter. Her move came just after a devastating hurricane, and doubtless this hampered the effort to locate Hannah, either living or dead. It has never been an option to give up. Hope is persistent, and many people join me in that hope, Barbara later said. I've heard from many people here that it's very, very rare for people to drown while swimming, and then when they do, the bodies are found relatively quickly. This has been affirmed by local law enforcement who confessed to being stumped by the mystery of Hannah's disappearance. But still, they're inclined to go with the most logical explanation, while Hannah's mother is on the record as saying, "I don't think she went out into the water. Everything that goes out comes back this way. She'd have washed up quickly." Hannah seems to be one of the rare missing person cases where even the most logical explanation has glaring holes in it. For all intents and purposes, Hannah waited in the Caribbean Sea that day, slipping beneath the waves, never to return. To avoid detection by the Coast Guard and EMTs in their search boats, Hannah's body would have to have been dragged along the seabed for miles on end, and even then, it would have floated back to land eventually thanks to the rather predictable currents of the Caribbean Sea. It would be folly to ascribe Hannah's disappearance to supernatural means, but it's difficult not to imagine the terrifying eldritch fates that might lead a troubled young woman to disappear once and for all, even after years of fighting to contain her psychological disorder. For years, the public had focused on the question of who took Hannah up. But in reality, a much more pertinent question might well be, what took Hannah up?